I walked into the apartment, the scent of Chloe's favorite basil pesto lingering faintly, and stopped dead. My phone vibrated in my hand, reminding me of the impending doom, disguised as a Sunday dinner. Why need veto power over all your major life decisions? The message from Elias Peterson had read, its tone formal, non-negotiable, and utterly deranged. Elias was Chloe's father, and that message was the unofficial dinner invitation. For 4 years, I, Alex, a 31-year-old project manager who believed in logical systems and clear boundaries, had been playing a dangerous game of tolerance. I loved Chloe, my sweet, talented partner. She was 29 and deserved a life free of the daily, suffocating scrutiny her parents imposed. But I had hoped, foolishly, stupidly, that time, distance, and my presence would slowly encourage her to grow out of their shadow. However, felt less like optimism and more like a chronic ache. Take last month. We needed a new vacuum cleaner for the apartment. A purchase of maybe $200. After 30 minutes of researching models and agreeing on the perfect Dyson, Chloe had excused herself to the bathroom. 10 minutes later, she returned. Mom says Dyson is overrated, she told me, pulling up a link to a bulky, 70-pound industrial cleaner her mother, a woman who hasn't vacuumed in 2 decades, had recommended. When I pushed back, gently, she gave me the signature performance, the quiet, sighing retreat that signaled my logical argument had caused her genuine, albeit passive, aggressive, distress. It was always like this. Not major issues, but constant, tiny intrusions that eroded our shared space. They called every single day, sometimes twice, demanding updates on Chloe's projects, analyzing her clothing choices, and offering suggestions about our rent that were clearly veiled demands. I had always told myself, it is just their way of showing they care. I now realize that was the language of an idiot in denial. I recalled a conversation with my friend Sarah Cooper a year ago. Alex, Sarah had warned, there is a difference between caring and controlling. They treat Chloe like a retirement project, not a partner you are trying to build a life with. I had dismissed it, citing the 1,100-mile drive I had made with Chloe to see her brother's engagement, a trip they had only allowed after a weekend-long negotiation. Our apartment, the safe bubble we'd created, still felt like a neutral zone, largely because the lease was in my name and I had established some hard lines about spontaneous visits. But tonight's dinner, announced with that alarming text message, felt different. It was the formal announcement of a hostile takeover. I slipped off my shoes. The apartment was quiet. Chloe was in the shower, getting ready for the dinner. I walked to the window, watching the late afternoon sun settle over the suburban rooftops. I had spent so long avoiding the real issue. Chloe's complete lack of internal self-direction, by focusing on the noise of her parents. Tonight, I knew I could not avoid it anymore. They were not just demanding opinions, they were demanding authority. They were not just meddling, they were claiming ownership of my future. I walked toward the bedroom, a deep sense of dread replacing the usual low, grade annoyance. I felt a chill run down my spine, knowing that tonight, this 4-year dance of tolerance was about to end. And I had the sickening feeling That no matter what happened, my perfect life with Chloe was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would walk into that dinner one man and walk out another. The question was, which man would survive the night? The cold knot of dread from the text message had tightened in my stomach on the 20-minute drive to the Peterson house. Now, standing on their perfectly manicured lawn, I felt the familiar weight of their expectations pressing down on me. It was a museum piece of a room, reserved only for occasions when they needed to feel important, or when they needed to render someone else feeling small. A massive mahogany table, polished to a reflective sheen, dominated the space. It felt less like a place for shared meals and more like a conference table. Elias Peterson, sitting at the head, was the physical embodiment of a retired CEO. Mid-60s, silver hair perfectly coiffed. A suit jacket that probably cost more than my first car. He was conducting this dinner like a board meeting. Eleanor, his wife, sat opposite Chloe, maintaining a beatific, watchful silence. The enforcer, the one who executed the decisions Elias dictated. Chloe, usually so vibrant and talkative, was subdued. She wore the expensive, reserved dress Eleanor had suggested last week, and kept her gaze fixed on the embroidered linen napkin. She avoided my eyes, a tactic I knew well. If she did not look at me, she did not have to acknowledge the tension in the room. We got through the obligatory small talk. The questions about my logistics job, always framed in a way that subtly diminished my $8,000 salary, and the elaborate roast Eleanor had prepared. The food was excellent, of course. Everything they did was high quality, meticulously planned, and ultimately designed to convey their superiority. After the dessert plates were cleared, Elias steepled his fingers, cleared his throat. That specific, resonant sound he used before delivering a sermon. And the conversation shifted, plunging the room into the cold reality of the night. "Alex," Elias began, his voice deep and measured. "We've been discussing your relationship with Chloe. We think it's time to formalize some things, especially given the likelihood of marriage and children." Eleanor chimed in. "You two are getting serious. We need to establish how this family operates for the long term." "Okay," I said, my voice carefully level. "What exactly does that mean?" Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the breast pocket of his tailored jacket and produced an actual, physical piece of paper, folded precisely. It was not just a memo. It was a printed document, bound with a small silver clip. Seeing that document, I felt the first real spike of fear. This was not a suggestion, it was a manifesto. He laid the paper flat on the table, centering it between us. "We've outlined the major life decisions that will require family approval going forward," he stated, his tone matter of fact, as if he were discussing a tax filing. "These are critical areas, Alex, where emotional reactions and impulsive behavior must be managed. Career changes, large purchases over $5,000, relocation, the timing and number of children, and any major medical decisions involving those children." I stared at the list, then at the paper, feeling a bizarre sense of dislocation. Was this a joke? Was this some elaborate, misguided test? Family approval? I repeated slowly. "Veto power. Eleanor clarified from across the table, smoothing the already smooth surface of the tablecloth with her fingers. Why need veto power over major decisions? That's how this family works. We've always operated this way. My mind raced back to my core motivation: autonomy. They were demanding the exact thing I valued most. You want veto power over my life decisions? I asked, needing to hear the absurdity confirmed aloud. Over decisions that affect the family unit. Elias corrected, leaning forward slightly. You are not just marrying our daughter, Alex. You are joining this family, and this family operates by consensus. We are bringing you into the fold, offering our guidance, our resources. He spoke the word, resources, as if it were currency. I looked at Chloe. She was still examining her plate, tracing the intricate design of the pattern, her face blank. My heart started to beat a heavy, desperate rhythm against my ribs. It was now or never. I needed her to speak up, to show me that the woman I loved existed separate from her parents' control. I needed her to show me that she valued our two-person unit more than this stifling consensus. Are you hearing this, Chloe? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She finally looked up, her expression strained, but utterly devoid of defiance. And here, in that silent, formal dining room, the perfect veneer of our 4-year relationship cracked wide open. She nodded. A slight, sickening nod that sealed our fate. They have a point, she said quietly, her voice sounding small and far away. They have always guided my decisions. They know what is best. It has worked out well for me. The words weren't a defense of her parents. They were a confession of her complete and total submission. The external threat of the veto document immediately paled in comparison to the internal devastation caused by that single, heartbreaking acceptance. My focus shifted entirely from Elias and his demands to the woman I thought I was going to marry. Her quiet, sickening nod, the acknowledgement that her parents should have authority over my life, was the sound of the future collapsing. Worked out well. I repeated, the sound of my voice thin and sharp in the formal room. Chloe, you are 29 years old. You asked your mother permission to cut your hair last month. And you called your mom before accepting your current job, and she told you to negotiate harder, and you almost lost the offer. That was different. Chloe mumbled, still avoiding my eyes. She was arguing the details while missing the disaster. She was right about the salary. She was guessing. I countered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She does not even work in your industry. She was asserting control. And you let her. Elias held up a heavy hand, the signal for silence. This is exactly what we are talking about. Emotional reactions, impulsive decisions. Family oversight prevents these kinds of outbursts. My internal alarm bells, which had been ringing for 4 years, suddenly stopped. Not because the danger was over, but because the crisis had passed, leaving behind a cold, desolate clarity. I took a breath, counted to 5 internally, gathering the last threads of my professionalism. I was done shouting. I was done negotiating. Let me understand this correctly, I said, keeping my voice level, precise, and dangerously calm. You, Elias, want the legal authority to veto my career moves, my large purchases, whether and when I have children, And where I live. Within reason? Eleanor interjected, attempting to inject a false note of reasonableness. We're not unreasonable people. I ignored her, looking only at Chloe. And you? I said, my voice hardening slightly. You are okay with this? She nodded again, a flicker of tears appearing in her eyes, tears of discomfort rather than repentance. It makes sense, she whispered. They are experienced. They have made good choices. Why wouldn't we use that resource? That was the final confirmation. 4 years of tolerating the daily intrusion, the surprise visits, the suggestions that were really demands. 4 years of telling myself that the problem was them, not her. 4 years of waiting for her to grow into the independent, self-directed woman I believed she could be. The reality was that she didn't want to be independent. She loved the safety of the gilded cage. She needed the veto. Something clicked in my head, hard and final, like a lock engaging. It wasn't anger. It was the clinical recognition that the relationship I thought I had was a fabrication. Love was not enough if it required the complete erasure of my autonomy. I stood up slowly, the movement scraping my chair back against the polished wood floor. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. Where are you going? Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with surprise, unused to disobedience. I looked at Elias, who was mid-sip on his water. I met Chloe's widening, tearful gaze. I took in the mahogany table, the ridiculous document, the perfect roast, and the suffocating control. Then veto this, I said. My voice was a clear, low strike. I am out. The ensuing silence was incredible. Elias actually choked, his mouth falling open as he tried to reconcile my statement with his carefully printed power structure. Eleanor looked genuinely horrified, as if I had insulted the queen. Chloe simply stared, tears now beginning to trace paths down her cheeks. You cannot be serious. Elias finally managed, his voice strained. Completely serious, I confirmed, grabbing my jacket from the back of my chair. I am not signing up for a life. I have time of asking your permission to live my own life. This is not a family. It is a dictatorship with better food. You are overreacting, Eleanor insisted, standing up, trying to physically enforce her command. Sit down. Let us discuss this like adults. Adults do not need veto power over other adults, I said, putting on my jacket. That is the whole point of being an adult. Babe, wait. Chloe pleaded, finally finding her voice. You nodded, I said, stopping only because I had to deliver this one last, brutal truth directly to her. You actually nodded when they said they should control our decisions, our future, our kids. You did not hesitate for a second. You chose them. I did not think you would react like this, she whispered, the quintessential excuse of the passive participant. How did you think I would react? I demanded, the composure finally fracturing into sheer disbelief. Great idea! Cannot wait to run my every choice by your parents for the next 50 years. You are being dramatic. No, I said, turning for the door. I am being clear. First time for everything in this relationship, apparently. I walked out of the museum house, through the foyer, and out the heavy front door, leaving the three of them frozen in the wreckage of their perfect power dynamic. The air outside was cool and clean. I got into my car and drove away. Before I even hit the highway, my phone began vibrating continuously. A chorus of calls from Elias, Eleanor, and Chloe. I ignored them all. When I reached our shared apartment, my apartment now, I turned my phone off, sealing myself off from the entire system. 4 years of patience had earned me this one. Final, self-respecting act of defiance. The arc had shifted from avoidance to action. And the overwhelming feeling was a painful, absolute relief. The silence after I walked out didn't last long. The buzzing on my phone was the sound of the entire system trying to self-correct. It was a rapid, desperate cascade of calls and texts. Chloe's pleas, her mother's angry demands, Elias's stern, formal statements about reconciliation and family respect. I ignored them all, treating the device like a broken circuit. When I got back to the apartment, my first instinct was to change the locks, not because I feared intrusion, but because I needed the sixth psychological closure, a physical confirmation that the door separating my autonomy from their control was now mine alone to secure. Monday morning, the illusion of peace was shattered. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the distinct smell of expensive perfume and the unsettling sight of Chloe sitting on the edge of my bed. She must have used the spare key. "We need to talk," she said, her voice soft and strained, the calm before the performance. "You could have knocked or texted that you were coming over," I replied, sitting up, pulling the sheets around me. I turned off my phone because I did not want to talk. "That is not how relationships work," she sighed, giving me the performative sigh. The one that signaled she believed I was being difficult or irrational. "They did not mean it literally, Alex. They just want to feel included, consulted. You took it the wrong way. Your dad printed out a document, Chloe," I countered, my voice flat. "He is thorough. It is a quality. I will grant him that. But it is controlling. There is a difference." She tried the gentle approach then, putting a soft, pleading hand on my arm. "Baby, I love you. 4 years. We have built something real. Please do not throw this away over a miscommunication." It was not a miscommunication, I insisted, pulling my arm away gently. They were very clear: veto power, family consensus. I heard every word. "So, what? You are just done just like that." I knew I needed to push past her avoidance and force a true decision. This was the ultimatum, not delivered in anger, but in the cold light of fact. Unless something fundamental changes. "Yes, I am done," I said. Fundamental change means you choosing our relationship over being your parents' puppet. It means setting boundaries. Real ones. Not "I will talk to them," and then nothing changes. They are your parents, but I would be your husband. At some point, you have to pick which relationship takes priority. She stood up abruptly, the softness gone, replaced by a rigid anger she'd learned from her mother. "You are giving me an ultimatum." "No," I stated, rising to face her. Matching her intensity but not her volume. "I am stating a fact. I will not marry into a situation where I have no autonomy. If that is a deal breaker, then I guess we are broken." She grabbed her purse, her eyes red with frustration and the realization that her familiar tactics weren't working. I need to think about this. Take your time, I replied. But think for yourself. Novel concept, I know. She left, and I sent her a brief text later that day suggesting she stay at her parents' house while she figured things out, emphasizing the need for space. Tuesday escalated. I was sitting at my desk when my receptionist called my extension. Her voice hushed. Alex, there is a gentleman here who says he is your father-in-law, Elias Peterson. My heart rate jumped, but my mind was immediately calm. Elias would not ambush me in front of my coworkers. Tell him I'll meet him outside, I instructed. I went down to the lobby and walked him directly to the parking lot. He was doing his full patriarch, routine, arms crossed, jaw set, radiating stern authority. You embarrassed my daughter, he said, skipping any greeting. You embarrassed my wife. You embarrassed me. I declined your proposal, I corrected him. That is not embarrassing. That is self-respect. Self-respect. He laughed, a short, sharp, entirely unkind sound. You are a mid-level project manager. Making what? 85,000. My daughter could do much better. We allowed this relationship to continue because she seemed happy. We have connections, resources. We were prepared to help you both build a real future. Now you have thrown that away because your ego could not handle some reasonable family involvement. Veto power over when I have kids is not family involvement. Elias, I said, looking him dead in the eye. It is insanity. And I need a partner who can make decisions without calling her mommy first. Your daughter is not that person. He stepped closer, his face reddening. You will regret this. When you are alone in 5 years, wondering what happened. Remember this moment. I will remember the moment your daughter chose you over building her own life, I countered. That is what I will remember. He did not have a comeback for that. He simply pivoted, got into his fancy SUV, and drove off. Leaving me standing in the sunlit parking lot, my resolve hardened into a diamond, like clarity. The strain was immense, but I was not breaking. I was finally, truly, fighting for myself. The conflict had shifted from internal deliberation to external, non-negotiable enforcement of boundaries. I texted Sarah Cooper immediately. I need a drink, and maybe a therapist recommendation. She replied instantly, on it. You did good. 2 weeks of painful, necessary silence followed, broken only by the inevitable text, a request for coffee. I hadn't seen Chloe since her parents instructed her to move out after my ultimatum. An action that served as its own answer to my demand for independence. I knew this meeting wouldn't be about reconciliation, but about her Asar's false compromise. Her last, desperate attempt to manage the conflict without changing her core behavior. I agreed, not out of hope, but out of a perverse need to see the argument through to its logical conclusion. We met at a quiet cafe, 10 minutes from my apartment. The energy between us was thick and brittle. The kind of awkward tension that settles when two people know the script has failed. We sat in a corner booth, the sounds of the espresso machine and idle chatter providing a soundtrack to our disaster. Chloe looked tired, her eyes red, rimmed. But she had an air of determined focus. The focus of someone who had practiced her pitch. I have had time to think. Alex, She started, twisting the paper napkin in her hands. And you might have had some valid points. Elias got carried away. He does that sometimes. I printed a contract. I corrected her gently, watching her for any genuine spark of self-awareness. I know, it was extreme. But I talked to them. I stood up to them. She insisted, leaning forward, eager to show me her progress. They are willing to compromise. My heart sank. Compromise. She was bringing me back to the negotiation table she had allowed her parents to set. Compromise how? I asked, bracing myself. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to her notes app, the ultimate tool of the dutiful daughter. They have agreed to reduce the financial threshold. She read, her voice earnest. Major purchases over EVs $10,000 instead of 5. And they will be heirs advisory on career moves. Instead of having veto power, they want to be consulted, not controlling. It is a huge step, Alex. They have never done this for anyone. I stared at her, the absurdity of the moment overwhelming the pain. It was a perfect microcosm of our failure. You negotiated terms with your parents about how much control they get over our relationship. I stated, the realization hitting me with ice-cold clarity. You did not recognize the problem yourself. You simply brokered a better deal to get me back. I thought that is what you wanted. She cried, the tears finally arriving. Boundaries. They are setting boundaries. I wanted you to set boundaries because you recognized the toxicity. I insisted, pushing the coffee cup away. Not because you are acting as an intermediary to facilitate a less invasive level of control. The document got shorter, Chloe, but the mindset didn't change. You still think parents negotiating control over their adult daughter's marriage is just family being family. You still think this is normal. She leaned back, deflating, the practiced composure collapsing. So nothing I do will be good enough? She accused, the statement ringing with the entitlement she'd been taught. The thing you need to do is recognize independently that you have been living under their thumb your whole life. I told her, my voice heavy with disappointment. I cannot do that for you. No revised contract can do that for you. She wiped her eyes roughly. They are not controlling. They are protective. There is a difference. You are 29 years old, I said, looking out the window, unable to maintain eye contact with her confusion. What are they protecting you from? Making your own choices. Experiencing consequences. Living. The simple act of living your own life, separate from their system. We sat in silence for a long time. The coffee grew cold. The truth, blunt and inescapable, hung between us. I do not know how to be what you want. She finally whispered. I do not want you to be anything except yourself. I countered, turning back to her. The problem is, I do not think you know who that is without their input. And I cannot sacrifice my entire life, my entire identity, waiting for you to find out. I stood up, leaving money on the table for both coffees. You figure out what you actually want, Chloe. Not what they want, not what I want. What you want. And if that process leads you back to me with genuine, independent change, then maybe we talk. But if you are just trying to find the magic words to make me come back, so you can go back to exactly how things were. It will not work. I love you. But I love myself enough not to disappear into your family system. The conversation had shifted from confrontation to melancholic, resigned finality. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her alone with her notes app and her negotiated compromise. The chapter was closed. All that remained was dealing with the predictable, angry backlash from the Petersons. The final move in their predictable playbook was the only one that truly surprised me. A certified letter from Elias's lawyer. But before that calculated legal harassment, there was the personal, desperate ambush. It was a Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after I rejected Chloe's compromise document. I was making coffee, enjoying the peaceful, autonomous silence of my home, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Elias and Eleanor Peterson standing shoulder to shoulder on my doorstep. They were both dressed in heavy, formal attire, the kind of clothing they wore to church or major board meetings. A clear power move intended to signal the gravity of the occasion and my presumed lack of it. "May we come in, Alex?" Eleanor asked, her voice stiff and formal, devoid of any warmth. "I would rather talk out here," I replied, standing firm in the doorway. It was my space, and I was not letting them turn it into another, one of their negotiation rooms. Elias's jaw tightened. "Fine. We will be brief." "Please do. Our daughter is miserable." Eleanor started immediately, ignoring any pleasantries. "She has not been sleeping. She can barely function at work. This needs to end." "I agree," I said calmly. "She should talk to a therapist. Someone who can help her develop an independent identity." Eleanor bristled. "She does not need a therapist. She needs you to stop being stubborn." "I am not being stubborn," I countered. "I am having standards." Elias stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine, radiating menace. He bypassed the emotional appeal entirely and went straight for the lever he always pulled: money and influence. "Name your price, Alex." I blinked. "Excuse me. Everyone has a price," Elias stated, his voice ringing with the absolute conviction of a man who has always bought what he wanted. "A number. What would it take for you to come back, accept the family structure, and make my daughter happy again?" He genuinely thought I had left because I wanted a better financial deal. He believed this whole ordeal was a low-stakes negotiation for a raise. "You think I left because I wanted a better car or a nicer apartment? You think this is a negotiation?" I asked, a bitter, disbelieving laugh escaping me. "Everything is a negotiation," he insisted. "You want a bigger apartment? Done. A better car. A new job with triple your salary at a company I have connections with. Just tell me what you want." I looked at him, feeling a sudden surge of profound pity. He was so utterly, tragically deluded. He was trying to buy back the autonomy he demanded I surrender. "I want a partner who can think for herself," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Can you buy me that, Elias? Can you use your connections to purchase an adult woman who is capable of standing up to you?" His face went from red to purple. "You arrogant little—" "I am arrogant," I interrupted. "You showed up at my door trying to bribe me back into your control system. That is not arrogance. That is delusion. I left to preserve myself. And you think I can be bought back like a defective appliance?" Eleanor pulled at his arm, her face tight with sudden, humiliating realization. This was a mistake, Elias. He is not worth it. Finally, something we agree on, Eleanor, I said. I am not worth the effort of controlling. Neither is your daughter, but you have not figured that out yet. How dare you? She whispered. How dare I what? I challenged. Tell you the truth. Your daughter is almost 30, and she cannot make a decision without checking with you first. That is not closeness. That is a very developmental failure. And instead of recognizing it, you are standing on my porch trying to buy me. Elias looked like he wanted to hit me. Eleanor looked like she had swallowed something rotten. You will be alone forever. Eleanor spat, trying to deliver the final curse. No woman will put up with someone so disrespectful of family values. If family values means giving up my autonomy, then yes, I will pass, I concluded. Better alone than controlled. They left. Eleanor made a ridiculous show of dusting off her coat, as if my doorstep had contaminated her expensive clothing. I closed the door, walked straight to the kitchen, and poured myself a heavy measure of whiskey. It was 10 in the morning, but I had earned it. The bribe, however distasteful, had been a crucial validation. They had tried everything, and I had stood firm. But the Petersons were not done. 2 days later, I received the certified letter from Elias's lawyer. It was a formal cease and desist, claiming I had defamed the family's reputation and intentionally inflicted emotional distress on Chloe. They demanded I sign a non-disclosure agreement and pay $15,000 in damages. It was their final, pathetic attempt to maintain control, to literally buy my silence. I immediately forwarded the document to Sarah Cooper, who connected me with her corporate law friend, Marcus Harris. Marcus read it and laughed, loud and long. Alex, this is garbage, he said. They are trying to scare you into silence. There is no case. We will respond through a lawyer. Something short and factual. Make it clear you are not intimidated. Any further harassment will result in actual legal action. That $400 for Marcus's lawyer letter was the best money I ever spent. The letter stated there was no defamation, no emotional distress claim for breaking up, and that their demand for an NDA was attempted coercion. It concluded with a note that any further contact would be considered harassment. The system went quiet. Total silence. The bribe failed and the legal threat evaporated. I had survived the climax of their control. Now, I just had to wait for the consequences to hit the one place the Petersons truly cared about: their own carefully constructed reputation. While my lawyer's letter silenced Elias, the psychological fallout continued, affecting the only part of the family I respected: Chloe's brother David. I hadn't spoken to him since I left the dinner, but I'd always pegged him as the family member most likely to have some perspective. He was a smart guy who had quietly put distance between himself and his parents for years. The call came late one Friday night, from an unknown number. Hey, Alex, it is David. Awkward call, I know, but I wanted to reach out. What's up? David, I am sorry about all this, he said, his voice low. The dinner, the veto power thing. It is insane. I know. Do you? I asked, leaning against my kitchen counter. Because you grew up in it. I figured you might be immune to seeing how truly bizarre it is." He laughed, a short, unhappy sound. "No, I am not immune. Why do you think my fiancée and I are having our wedding 3 states away? We've already started putting distance. I love my parents, but I cannot live under their thumb." His validation hit me hard, providing a deep sense of relief I hadn't realized I needed. It proved my perception wasn't skewed by bitterness. "Your sister doesn't see it that way," I observed. "My sister is the golden child," David replied, a hint of long-held resentment in his tone. "She's never had to push back, because she's never wanted anything they didn't approve of. Until you." "What do you mean?" "Until me. You were the first major choice she made that they were genuinely iffy about. Not because of you specifically. You are perfectly adequate," he added wryly. "They just did not pick you. She found you on her own. That was threatening to them. You were a control battle they lost before it started." "Great. So I was a test she failed," I concluded. "Exactly. The minute they pushed, she folded. That is on her, not you. Thanks for calling. Genuinely. Yeah, Alex. For what it's worth, I respect how you handled it. Most guys would have caved. Most guys don't know what it's like to be managed by in-laws for 50 years. I have seen it with my uncle's marriage. Not pretty. You saved yourself a lifetime of that." We hung up. The conversation gave me a quiet sense of closure and justice, realizing my action was not just about me, but a necessary catalyst for my own freedom. But the true climax of the Petersons' power, the one that revealed the cracks to the extended world, happened a few weeks later at David's wedding. The day after the event, David sent me a text summary, which was better than any invitation I could have received. "Wanted you to know my wedding happened." The text read, "Parents showed up and tried to give a speech about family unity and proper decision making right after the official toasts. My wife's family looked horrified. I shut it down mid-sentence. Told them to sit down or leave. How did that go over?" I typed back instantly. They left. Made a huge scene in the parking lot. Chloe tried to play peacemaker and ended up crying in the bathroom. It was a disaster, honestly, but kind of freeing, too. You ripped off the band, later. The incident at the wedding was the public, undeniable moment of defeat for Elias and Eleanor. The control system, which relied entirely on absolute consensus and flawless appearances, had fractured in front of 50 people, including the extended family members who had always whispered about the Petersons' tendencies. David and his new wife went low contact. I heard through Sarah, who still had mutual friends, that Chloe's younger sister, the one who helped her move out, had started asking questions about her own controlling boyfriend. My action had caused a small, localized earthquake in their perfect world. My emotional arc was completing itself. I proposed with a 50. I accepted the vulnerability of the situation, the fact that I had lost 4 years and the woman I loved, but the loss was outweighed by the fierce protection of my identity. I no longer had to constantly defend myself or anticipate the next veiled demand. I had fully embraced the courage to be honest about my non-negotiable needs, and the subsequent pain was cleansing, not debilitating. My focus now shifted entirely to the mundane, autonomous life I had fought so hard to reclaim. Waiting for the final, distant communication from Chloe that would confirm her own, separate journey toward truth. I was free, and finally, undeniably, alone. But it was a solitude born of choice, not abandonment. I realized that my greatest fear, the fear of being alone, was infinitely preferable to the fear of being completely controlled. The weeks that followed Part 7 felt like living in the silence after a massive detonation. The Petersons had retreated after the lawyer's letter, their silence a grudging acceptance of their defeat. The brothers' call and the wedding drama had provided a strange, bittersweet sense of justice, a confirmation that I had not been insane for walking away. The debris had settled. All that remained was the quiet ache of loss and the vast, peaceful expanse of my newly reclaimed autonomy. Then, 2 months after the breakup, I got the call I had been half expecting. It wasn't a negotiation, a bribe, or an angry accusation. It was just Chloe. Her voice was small, hesitant, and tired. "I need to talk to you, Alex. Really talk. No negotiating. No deals." I agreed. We spoke on the phone. There was no need for another dramatic cafe meeting. "I have been seeing a therapist twice a week," she told me, a fact that genuinely shocked me. David suggested it. "She specializes in enmeshment." I leaned against the wall, listening. "How is that going?" "Terrible. Enlightening." "Both," she replied, a shaky laugh escaping her. "I am starting to see things I did not want to see about my family, about myself, about why I am the way I am." "That is good progress, Chloe. I am not calling to ask you back," she said quickly, anticipating my guard. "I know that is probably not possible. I wanted to apologize. For real. Not to fix things. But because you deserve it. You were right about everything. I have spent my whole life being their project instead of being a person. And I did not even notice until you refused to participate." That was the true emotional closure. Her apology was genuine, independent, and therapy-driven. It validated every lonely, painful step I had taken. "I appreciate that, Chloe," I said softly. "It is not too late to change." "Maybe," she replied. "But it is too late for us. I know that. I messed this up beyond repair. I couldn't bring myself to offer false hope. For what it is worth, I hope you figure out who you are. The real you. She is probably pretty great." "I guess I will find out," she finished. We hung up, and that was that. The 4-year saga was over, ending not with an explosion of anger, but with a quiet, mutual acceptance of reality. I settled into my new, quiet, autonomous life. I went to work, excelled in my logistics role, without consulting anyone. And when I came home, I did exactly what I wanted. I cooked elaborate meals without Eleanor's critiques, watched documentaries about penguins because I wanted to, and organized my apartment purely for my own satisfaction. The mundane acts of self-determination were glorious. I was more selective now about who I let into my life. The red flags looked different. I paid attention to how people talked about their families, how they handled disagreements with their parents, and what their biggest decisions were that their parents opposed. I had learned the hard way that a person's relationship with their past authority figures is the most accurate map of their capacity for future partnership. Last week, I ran into Eleanor Peterson at the grocery store. It was pure coincidence. She saw me first, rounding the frozen foods aisle, and the sight of me made her stop dead, her face contorting into a perfect mask of hatred and resentment. "I hope you are satisfied," she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "You have destroyed our family." I looked at her, the woman who had tried to buy my future and control my life, and felt absolutely nothing but indifference. The pain was gone. "Your family destroyed itself," I replied, my voice calm and conversational. "I just did not volunteer to participate in the wreckage." She opened her mouth, closed it again, unable to find a tactical response, and marched stiffly off toward the produce section. I finished my shopping, went home, and made myself dinner. Nobody called to approve my meal choices, nobody texted to veto my selection of wine, and nobody demanded I account for my evening plans. The profound peace of that total freedom was worth every ounce of the pain I had endured. 4 years of loving a project, and now, finally, the simple, honest business of just being me. I had chosen to be alone, rather than controlled, and in that choice, I found the only true peace there is.